So we're recording this, and this is going to be up on the Oily Friends YouTube channel. There we go. That's what I wanted to say once I get it loaded up. So tonight we're going to be talking about when weight loss is hard and some overlooked factors when it comes to weight that's hard to lose. And when we can break it down into these areas that maybe are overlooked, we can really focus on some targeted approaches to helping support a healthy weight in whatever might be going on with us. It's really loud here tonight. Okay, so as we're looking at the main causes of weight gain and some of the more common reasons why weight loss is challenging sometimes, there are four main areas. You'll notice that after diet, the other three are all part of the endocrine system. So you've got cortisol, which is adrenals, you've got thyroid, and then you've got reproductive female hormones like estrogen, progesterone. These are all part of the endocrine system. So when it isn't diet, it's usually one of the parts of the endocrine system. When they're connected, because they're connected together, sometimes when one of them is off, other ones might get off too. But we're going to look at some ways to tell if it's one of them in particular and how to support that one very targeted and in a way that will get you faster results. One thing, of course, with natural holistic health is that when you're supporting some area of your health specifically, you're supporting your whole body health too. So it's going to benefit these other areas as well, whatever you do in these areas. So when we talk about diet, that can be excess caloric intake. That can just be taking in too many calories. It can most often be intake of refined sugars or refined carbs, which is mostly what it is. And we'll talk about how that ties into hormones and also insulin resistance and things like that. And then also a low intake of healthy fats, which we know helps us to burn fat. So sometimes I see in groups where people are like, this person or my kid or whatever is having a hard time gaining weight. What should I do? And they're like, oh, increase their healthy fats. That doesn't work for that because that helps us actually maintain a healthy weight. And also healthy fats play a huge role in hormone health too. So it'll benefit us in that area as well. Stress and cortisol, which is a big thing right now. We're going to talk about that specifically and what cortisol weight looks like and how the effect from cortisol production affects our other hormones. We'll talk about thyroid, how to recognize if that's an issue without having to run a bunch of lab tests, because the thyroid is responsible for metabolism. So that plays a huge role in it. And as we get older, our thyroid tends to slow down, but we can support it in natural ways. And then hormones. We're going to talk about how estrogen dominance causes a buildup of estrogen in the fat cells. We're going to talk about all of these things in really simple terms tonight. So we're going to talk about cortisol weight first. And one of the things to know about cortisol weight is that it looks a certain way in the body. So I've included this picture because I want you to see, this is kind of more what cortisol weight looks like. It tends to be more around the midsection and especially in the belly area. So this picture doesn't quite show exactly, but if you look at the belly area, and if it's mostly in the belly area, that's usually cortisol weight. I need to go back to my notes and make sure I'm covering something. I didn't get my notes printed off. So I'm not sure how to get them out now. Okay. I don't know how to get my notes out. Let me find my notes here. Whoopsies. 1 second here. Okay. I'm going to go back to my notes. Nope, I can't do that. Sorry, guys. I forgot to print off my notes. I'm away from home. Okay. I'm going to skip around real quick here. Let's see here. I'm just going to wing it without my notes tonight. Okay. We're still going. All right, you guys hanging in there? So cortisol is released through the body in the fight or flight response. And this is usually when we're under stress, and it's more chronic stress. So like when you're exercising, your body produces cortisol in order to give you that adrenaline rush. But if there's chronic cortisol released over a long period of time, then it just keeps that inflammation from cortisol high in the body. And cortisol is also known as the death hormone, just because too much of it is really not a good thing. So it has a lot to do with inflammation, and then something else that's called pregnenolone steal. So I forgot a picture of this, but pregnenolone steal is when you have this demand on the body to release cortisol for a stress response. Now, when I say stress response, I don't just mean emotional stress. Emotional stress is a big part of it, but also like any physiological stress put on the body, like strenuous exercise, or even like surgery or something, will have a physiological stress response in the body. So any kind of stress, physiological, physical, emotional, any kind of stress demands the production of cortisol on the body. And what happens then is the body has these building block hormones called pregnenolone and DHEA, mostly pregnenolone is what we're going to focus on, that is meant to go towards making estrogen and progesterone. But when the body is requiring those building blocks to go towards cortisol, then we don't get the progesterone that we need. And this can contribute to hormone problems like we talked about, because again, it's all part of the endocrine system. So there are a few ways that plays into it. So if you can relate to some of that, which I think a lot of us can, just having been really kind of under a lot of extra stress this year for 2020, maybe you've noticed that belly weight going up, or for me, a lot of it too was before this year. It was just from years and years of not getting any sleep, nursing babies and having babies and things like that. So I knew that my cortisol was building up in my body. So one of the things that I found extremely helpful is to start with cleansing. So the first way to detox the cortisol weight is cleansing. The picture here is the cleansing trio, but you can customize this and make it what you want. So for instance, for me, I use the comfort tone. And just from that alone, I found a loss of some of the cortisol weight within a couple of weeks, a few pounds. The ICP is a powder, and that's like a fiber supplement. And we're going to talk actually about how fiber helps with other things too that can be related to weight gain. So that's a really good thing to add in. For me personally, I put Juva Power in place of the ICP, because it's a powder fiber supplement like ICP, but it also has extra support for the liver. So I like that one. And then for the enzymes, you can use Essential Zyme, which is one that I started, but you can choose which one you find works best for you too. So if you've got that trio, however you customize it, this is the first step for really any of these things to cleanse and work on. And then we have to manage our current cortisol so that we're not just really adding it right back into the body. And how we do that, my favorite three for doing that are these things. So we need to support our body's response to stress so that it doesn't keep building up in the body again. And for me, I found that cordyceps is extremely helpful for that. I have learned to recognize when there's a surge of cortisol in my body. Sometimes, like if you exercise, you might feel it where you feel like kind of foggy, or like you've got this brain buzz kind of thing going on. When you recognize that, that's cortisol, and you can recognize the times where you might need to, that pole is making noise, where you might need to help your body handle that stress response. So if I'm having something really kind of stressful or even exciting, because my body kind of sees that as stress too, I will take this before I know that I will get that brain buzz, which is that surge of cortisol, and then it won't happen. Obviously, sometimes we want that, but if we've had it chronically for a long time, we don't really want that. We need to tame that down. The next thing is CBD oil, which is an anti-catabolic, which means it regulates how much cortisol is released into the system. And there are really amazing things about CBD and cortisol. They actually did some research on CBD and I can't get my notes, so I forgot exactly, but they discovered that when they turned off one of the endocannabinoid receptors for CBD oil in the body, that like antidepressant medications didn't work. And so there's something really powerful about the endocannabinoid receptors as far as how we handle stress and those kinds of emotions and things like that. So maybe, you know, for me, I've done an ITOVI scan sometimes when I'm stressed and I'm like, oh, it's probably going to say cortisol, and sometimes it does, but sometimes it also says CBD oil on it. So it's really great for that. And then a couple of other things. Obviously, there's lots of research out there about inhaling calming oils and the effect that it has on our mind to just calm the mind and not demand that release of cortisol when we're under stress. There are a couple of other things that are really great. So clary sage is super, super great for that topically as well as inhaling it, but I just slather it on topically, and I find that it's really, really calming and helping slow down the cortisol release. You can take frankincense and put a drop under your tongue, and it will reduce the amount of cortisol your body produces when you're in that cortisol response by 40%, which is huge. And I've done it before, sometimes when I didn't have cortisol or I just wanted to try it instead, and it worked fabulously. So there's quite a few things you could do. Rosemary is another one that I find very calming, so I will inhale that one as well. So these are some things to avoid for managing cortisol. One of the things that I forgot to put on there as I'm drinking a tea, this is tea, not a coffee, is watching caffeine intake. You really got to be careful because caffeine demands the production of cortisol. And so you'll notice, like maybe for yourself or for other people, the more that they get on a regular cycle of getting caffeine, and needing it for energy, the more they need it. It's kind of this vicious cycle. And that's because it's demanding the production of adrenaline and cortisol on the body. And over time, the adrenal glands, which produce that, are getting more and more tired out, and they can't keep up with it. And so the demand becomes stronger and the need becomes stronger. It's this really vicious cycle. So really working through the caffeine thing, and we have some really great teas from Young Living that are delicious, and you can combine them in ways that will, work great. So another thing is that surprises most people is intermittent fasting. You may have heard about it. It's a lot of, there's a lot of attention to it lately, but it actually increases cortisol production, which we do not want for those of us who are having to manage our cortisol and get it down again. So intermittent fasting is not a good idea for those people. For those people with high cortisol levels and needing to lose cortisol weight, we want to focus on eating every couple of hours. And we'll talk about some diet tips and stuff, obviously not having carbs a ton and things like that, but still those who have high cortisol do need some carbs. So we can't go keto either with losing cortisol weight. Strenuous workouts like CrossFit and other ones are really not good for people who have high cortisol and need to detox it. So rather than those, choose workouts like stretching, yoga, strength building, and cardio. And then obviously managing emotions and just working through those with our oils and prayer and other things to make sure that we're not letting lots of situations increase our cortisol levels. So we're going to talk also now about estrogen dominance, which is when estrogen is high and progesterone then becomes low, because the progesterone cannot balance out the estrogen and it goes out of control. So some of the symptoms of estrogen dominance are heavy periods and irregular cycles, breast tenderness, difficulty losing weight and weight gain. And this is sometimes more weight gained in the chest area and then also in the lower body area, whereas we talked about how cortisol is more in the stomach area. And so this is when this is another reason why, and we're going to talk a little bit. Let me see if I can't remember if I put a slide for it or not. Okay, I did. So with estrogen dominance, let me move this so we can make sure to see. Okay, so With estrogen dominance, estrogen is stored in fat cells. So that means that like the more estrogen that we have building up in our body, the more it's going to need somewhere to be stored. And the body will create fat cells in order for it to have somewhere to be stored. And so we really want to make sure to keep down our body's demand to create storage spaces for more estrogen. So here's how we detox excess estrogen, but also at the same time, make sure that we're not adding more to our body. Number one, first and foremost, avoiding products with parabens and synthetic fragrances, because these are xenoestrogens, which are a form of estrogen that the body takes on and creates more fat cells to store them. Infrared sauna is a really great way to help detox. Normally we want to detox through the primary pathways, which is why I talked about cleansing first, because the bowels and the urine is our primary detox pathway. Skin is secondary. So it's not the first one we want to detox through, but especially if you do cleansing first and then you do infrared sauna, it's a really great way to help the body release some of those fat cells. Avoiding refined sugar is very important. One thing to keep in mind is that the ovaries actually have insulin receptors on them. And so our female system is very sensitive to sugar intake. So that's why people, that's what PCOS is, like ovarian cysts are caused by sugar intake because of the constant insulin receptor action on the ovaries from consuming sugars. Minimize or avoid carbs with breakfast. That's not a good time to give your body a bunch of carbs if you're working on detoxing excess estrogen and cortisol for that matter. We talked about ICP or Juba Power for getting enough fiber, but that also means more vegetables, more leafy greens. The fibers have a way of basically clinging to some of those fat cells and hormones and stuff and helping the body eliminate them. And then there's a detox protocol that you can use with the Prenolone cream and Progestins Plus. Half a tablespoon of Prenolone cream plus 5 drops of Progestins Plus rubbed into those areas until the tube of cream is all gone. And that's just a really nice estrogen detox protocol. And that will help balance out your progesterone with your estrogen. So like, because the more progesterone you have, the less the estrogen can grow out of check. It basically keeps it in check if you have enough. So now we're going to look at symptoms of a slow functioning thyroid. And this can be called hypothyroidism, but it can just be a thyroid functioning not ideal as well. You can use lab tests if you've had labs before for your thyroid. I think I have a slide with that. Yes, I do. So I will talk about some numbers to look at, but you can look at symptoms. These are some of the symptoms, and you'll notice that a couple of them are similar to estrogen dominance, but some of them are a little bit different. You can test by checking your body temperature in the morning. If it's low, we have a Post and Oily Friends on that. So if it's low, you'll know that it might be your thyroid. Low energy, hair loss, depression, brittle fingernails, those are all more pronounced for indicating that your thyroid is slow. And since our thyroid is responsible for our metabolism, that's how it plays into difficulty losing weight. One of the things I wanted to say too about that is you'll notice with slow functioning thyroid that maybe like your hands and your feet, your extremities feel cold a lot too, because it plays a role in circulation also. So just some things to know if maybe your weight loss goals have been halted by thyroid. And this, if you have thyroid, you can feel free to take a picture of this. We have it in our group too. But this is how to kind of measure up your thyroid labs if you get some from a doctor, because most doctors will say that they're normal when they're not normal. I've had people in the past many people whose doctor said it's fine, it's normal. That's not why you're having those symptoms that we just talked about in the last slide. It's got to be something else. And I look at their numbers and I'm like, no, they're not ideal. What happens is that they created normal ranges based on the average of a population of people. But you know what? Most people aren't don't have a healthy thyroid. So if you're basing averages on the regular population and not people who are functioning healthy with a healthy thyroid, you don't have ideal parameters. So these are ideal parameters that we look at for these numbers. Most doctors will only run a TSH, but that's a good start, but we like to see the other ones too. So this just talks about where numbers should be, and then bottom shows what nutrients are essential for that. Iodine, that helps make T4. And I'm trying to remember if, yes, okay, so we'll talk about some things for all of these. Zinc, so like if somebody's free T4 is good, but their free T3 is low, then that might indicate that they just need more zinc. And then selenium is also a part of thyroid health. So one of the main things for optimizing thyroid function is Thyromin. And this is a really excellent supplement that contains iodine, thyroid glandulars, and the plant extracts, herbs and oils for optimizing thyroid function. I've had people on this and I've seen numbers come back after 6 months or longer and just be a completely different number. Some people have gone from like 6 something on their TSH to 4 in 6 months of taking Thyromin. I will say that I'm finding a lot of women need twice the daily dosage on the bottle that's recommended. But if you're just starting out with it, I would say to start slow with it and just start with 1, because iodine can be detoxifying. To help balance that out, you want selenium. And we talked about how selenium is an essential nutrient for thyroid function. Super B has selenium in it. It also has B vitamins, and B vitamins are absolutely crucial for optimizing hormone and thyroid health. I was just talking to my daughter on the way over about how much of a role B vitamins play in our hormone health. So, and then it also has the added bonus of having selenium right there in that, so you don't have to find something separate for that. Sulfurzyme contains MSM, which is a dietary sulfur. It's one of the, I think it's like the 3rd most essential nutrient in our body. Nobody can be allergic to it. It's not sulfa, it's not sulfites, it's sulfur. It's a dietary sulfur. It's a mineral that our bones are made out of, or that's in our bones. It's a part of our body. Nobody's allergic to it. Everybody needs it. And it plays some really amazing roles in thyroid health, joint health, gut health. Also, it really helps with hair regrowth. So that's why I included it in the top 3 for optimizing thyroid function. Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, we're doing good. A couple of other things that you need to make sure to avoid when you're optimizing your thyroid function: avoid unfiltered tap water. The chlorine and fluoride in tap water and also pools blocks the absorption of iodine into the thyroid. So somebody could continuously have a low functioning thyroid by doing all of the things we talked about if they're continuously bathing in, showering in, and drinking tap water that's not filtered. Soy and soybean oil is something you want to really watch out for if you're supporting your thyroid health and your hormone health, because foods containing soy are linked to hypothyroidism and estrogen dominance. And just, yeah, I've seen some people go vegan and they wanted to, you know, replace their meats with soy, and they gain a ton of weight, even though the other stuff they were eating is really healthy. So that's part of it. And then there are some really strong links and research out there about gluten and the connection between that and autoimmune thyroid issues. Most cases of hypothyroidism are autoimmune. So that's why we want to see the full tests when people do get tests, to see if the slow functioning thyroid is related to more of an autoimmune inflammatory issue. But regardless, gluten prevents the healing of these autoimmune conditions. And so avoiding it is best. One thing people will often do is they'll say like, well, I don't have it very often, or I only have a little bit when I do have it. The problem with that is that the gluten proteins in the body stay in there for 6 months, 6 weeks to 6 months, they say. And so whether it's the tiniest amount that you consume or not. And so for those who maybe have this going on, the only way to really support it and to heal is by completely eliminating it for at least 6 weeks and then seeing. I know that we did that with one of my kiddos who had some injuries from his childhood vaccines, and we cut out gluten, and I didn't see anything for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then all of a sudden, I think it was after the 6th week, it was like a light switch flipped, and we saw just a huge difference. So that was a really cool experience. Other considerations. So when we talk about insulin resistance, we really want to make sure that we're focusing on exercise, but we do want to for any of those things. 25% of our weight has to do with our activity level. So this is definitely not something we can overlook. Actually, when it comes to insulin resistance, exercise brings, and this is important too for cortisol, because sometimes when we have cortisol issues, we also have blood sugar issues. So exercise brings glucose. Now that's like our blood sugar, you know, into our blood where it can be burned for energy, and then it's using it up when we exercise. So that's how we support that, and that should be a combination, like we talked about, of cardio, not really strenuous, but cardio, and then strength training. So, and that's just really going to help burn fat. We need to burn that fat that estrogen is stored in as well. So medications, you want to check those because many of them are linked to weight gain. Insulin is linked to weight gain. Some of them contain a molecule of fluoride in them, which will have hypothyroidism or autoimmune thyroid disease as a side effect, or things like that. So that's just something to look at and talk to your doctor about. Let's see here, stored memories. So when we store memories, contrary to popular belief, they don't go into the brain, they go in different parts throughout the body. And in order for our body to store them, it needs space to do that. So sometimes weight is because we've stored memories or unhealthy emotions or things like that in the body, and they need to be released. That's why sometimes when people lose weight, their emotions might be off, their mood might be off. It can bring up some things like that. So pretty crazy, I know. Another thing I didn't put on here is talking about sleep. So increased and improved sleep actually supports insulin sensitivity and other things. There's different hours of the night where our body is regenerating and working on and healing things that are related to thyroid and hormones and stuff like that. So again, this is where like the CBD and the oils come into play also to support those areas. And then of course, when we talked about diet, we talked about fewer carbs, not necessarily saying low carb. That doesn't always work for a lot of people. It could seem like it works at first, but then it could make things worse. More good fats, so that's always good. When we say good fats, obviously that's like MCT, coconut oil, eggs if you're doing eggs, avocado, olive oil, almonds, almond oil, things like that. And then more vegetables and leafy greens, which we talked about. So that's that. I hope I didn't go too fast. I look like I did cover a lot in a short period of time, but I'm trying to condense these videos down so that you guys don't have to spend an hour learning, but that you can hopefully get the same amount of information in half an hour. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop something in the chat box and we can take some questions. I can also stop the recording if you would feel more comfortable asking your questions that way.